Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Uh, in today's class, we are going to be talking about separation techniques. So, separation. So, what are separation techniques? So, we are not going to be talking about the definition of this, since we all know what we mean by separation techniques. There are many types of separation techniques that we are going to be talking about, but specifically in this video we are going to be talking about three types of separation techniques, and that will be the filtration, evaporation, and crystallization. So we are going to be talking about filtration, evaporation, and lastly crystallization. So imagine, let's say this is a beaker. So, and we have let's say we have soluble substance here. Soluble substance. Let's say this is solution. What meaning of a solution? Solution is when you have a solvent and a solute dissolved together, so they form what we mean by solution. What do you mean by solution? What do you mean by solute? Solute is heavy substance that can dissolve in a solvent. For example, H2O is a solvent because it can dissolve many solutes. So for example, we have NaCl. NaCl, that's our common salt. It's a solute because it can dissolve in a solvent. H2O is a what? Solvent. Let's say we have solute and a solute that is dissolved in a solvent. In this case, we have NaCl. We call it solution. We call it salt solution, to be more specific. So let's say we have salt solution. So in this kind of solution, this is basically mixture. Which kind of mixture is this? Homogeneous mixture, because there's no boundary separation. You don't see some side where there is you can't say this is salt and this is water. It is mixed together in such way that you can't separate it and say this is salt in this side and this is water in this side, and this is what we call solution. How can we separate this kind of thing? How can we separate it? It turns out that there are two types of techniques we can use to separate this kind of mixture. So, and that is our evaporation and crystallization. So, evaporation and what? And crystallization. So these the techniques we are going to be using: evaporation and crystallization. What are we going to be doing in evaporation? So we are going to boil the solution. So in the process of boiling the solution, when we are boiling something, the solvent or the water molecules in that solution, they will start to be evaporating. Is that also? They will be evaporating. They will turn into a vapor, whereby they will leave the solution. So the solvent will turn into vapor and leave. But what of the solute? Solute will remain in the pot. Let's say we have, what are the instruments we use for evaporation? For example, we use our evaporating dish. And we use, let's say this is our tripod stand, and we use a Bunsen burner. Let's say this is the flame we use to boil the solution. We call this Bunsen burner. We call this thing that we use to hold the evaporating dish. So we call it tripod stand. Tripod stand. So, and this beaker, the one that we use to boil it, the solution, we call it what? Evaporating dish. This is our evaporating dish. So now what we do is that the evaporating dish will contain the solution that we wanted to separate. Let's say we want to separate NaCl out of water. You know, water and NaCl have already mixed together. Now we wanted to separate them. What are we going to use? The technique is called evaporation. How are you going to do it? So it turns out that we are going to burn it. In the process of burning it, the solvent, that is the water, they will turn into solvent. They will turn into what? Vapor. And they will leave the evaporating dish in form of what? Vapor. In form of vapor. This is a pure water. A pure water that is living in form of what? Vapor. So it turns out that after some times, you will see some crystals. Some crystals will be forming. Some crystals will be what? Will be forming. Some crystals will be forming. So that means the water will vaporize and you are left with your what? With your salt. So I just used NaCl as an example. So but in this kind of separation techniques, that is evaporation, we can't use it turns out we can't actually use evaporation to separate salt and water, because NaCl can easily be decomposed by heat. It will damage by heat. But there are some salts. You know, we don't have only one type of salt in chemistry. There are many salts. So there are some salts in which we can use evaporation to separate them from what? From their solution. So when you heat them by evaporating dish, the water will turn into what? Into vapor and leave. So, and crystals of salt will started to be forming. So now you can separate your what? Your solute from your solvent. We can separate our solute from our what? Solvent. But mind you, in this kind of techniques, we can only separate solutes that cannot be easily decomposed by heat. What meaning of decomposed? When something is decomposed, that means it is damaged by what? By heat. By heat, which we call thermal decomposition. Thermal decomposition. It turns out that we can't use these techniques to separate NaCl from its solution, because NaCl can easily be damaged by what? By heat. But there are some salts that we can use evaporation to separate them from what? From their solution using evaporation. What if you want to separate some salts that are easily decomposed by heat? What are we going to use? So now we want to separate a solution that contains a salt that can be easily decomposed by heat, that can be easily damaged by heat, and we don't want it to be damaged. We want to recover it back from the solution. How are you going to do it? So it turns out that there is another technique that is more similar to that of evaporation, and we call it crystallization. In crystallization, we use the same apparatus. But we are going to reduce the heat. So earlier, when we are talking about evaporation, we use evaporating dish, we use tripod stand, we use Bunsen burner. But in this, we use water bath, or we will call it water bath. So this is it, something like this. So this will contain very hot water, and you will have your tripod stand, that also, and you will have your what? Evaporating dish. So this evaporating dish will contain the solution in which you want to separate. So you want to separate the solute, the salt from this solution. So as the solution is getting as the temperature of the solution is rising up, what will happen? It turns out that the solvent will always evaporate, will always turn into vapor and leave the solution. So when the solvent leave the solution, so you will be seeing some crystals of what? Some crystals of salt forming. So, but we don't want that crystal to be damaged or to be decomposed by a lot of heat. So you don't want it to be decomposed by a lot of heat. What are you going to do? You will stop it, you will put it down from the heat. After that, you are going to filtrate it. You know filtration. You are going to filter out all these crystallized salt. So when you filter it out, you'll be left with what? Ordinary solvent. That's the water component, H2O. So some H2O have already vaporized, and it is left. We are left with some solvents that have not yet been vaporized. So we will put down the Bunsen burner, we put down the evaporating dish, and we will filter out the already crystallized salt, because we don't want to add a lot of heat to this solution, because we wanted to recover back the salt and we don't want it to be damaged. So this technique we use is called crystallization. Very simple. We use crystallization. So now we know if you want to separate soluble substances, we use two techniques. One meaning of soluble. So when something that can be dissolved in water is dissolved in water, and we want to separate it back, we want to recover it back after it is being dissolved in the solvent. What are the techniques you can use? We can use our evaporation, and we can use our crystallization. That's it. What if you have a mixture whereby you have a liquid and some insoluble substances present inside it? So these are the insoluble substances. So this is the liquid. So how are you going to separate this kind of mixture? This is mixture, right? How are you going to separate it? It turns out that this is very simple. We can filtrate it out. We use something that is called filtration. So under filtration, what are the apparatus we are going to be using? We are going to be using our filter paper. Number 2, we are going to be using our filtration funnel. So filtration funnel, and that's all. So let's see what's the meaning of filtration funnel. So this is how it looks. This is our filtration funnel. So, and you will put filter paper on the top of this filtration funnel. So filter paper is a paper that we use to separate that filter paper. It contains a very, very, very tiny hole in which any solid particles can never pass across the tiny holes. Only water can pass. So if you use it to separate this solid, we just pour it into this funnel. You have already put the filter paper on the top of this funnel. So when you pour the liquid, so the liquid part of the mixture can only pass through the filter paper, but the solid part will be trapped. The solid part will be trapped by the filter paper, unable to be filtrated. So that is very simple techniques, right? So now we have learned three separation techniques. So we have learned that filtration. So filtration is used to separate a mixture Filtration is used to separate a mixture of insoluble substance. Insoluble substance. Those are the substances that are not soluble in water, for example. So we use what? Filtration. In filtration, what are the apparatus we use? We use our filter paper and filtration funnel. So when we want to separate a soluble substance from its solution. Well, what meaning of soluble substance? There are those substances that can be dissolved in water or in some other solvents. For example, when you dissolve your sodium chloride, that is your common salt, you dissolve it in water. So that is called solution. How are you going to separate it? It turns out that there is two techniques you can use. You can use the crystallization, when the salt you are going to be separating is easily decomposed by heat. You don't want to add a lot of heat to it. You don't want to damage it. So we use crystallization. What of evaporation? When you are not scared to damage the salt. That means the salt you are separating from the solution is not easily decomposed by heat. You can use evaporation. You will burn heat. The water part of the solution will vaporize, and the salt will remain in the evaporating dish. So that's it. Very simple. So now we know filtration, evaporation, and crystallization. In the other class, we will be talking about all other separation techniques different from this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.